Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you're in the right session. This is the session on smart homes, smart neighborhood. We're going to be having a conversation this morning about how smart homes are, by focusing on energy efficient construction and distributed generation as well as connectivity, are not only changing the consumers of those homes, the comfort and convenience, but also how utilities and other service providers are interacting with those homes as well. My name is Todd Rath. I'm the Director of Marketing Services at Alabama Power Company. The reason I am here today is I was involved in the first smart neighborhood in the Southeast that utilized a community-size microgrid that was powering hyper-efficient homes as well as connected homes. And some of the reasons that living laboratory was set up to answer some of the questions that we will discuss and explore today. We have three panelists to help us with those conversations, all from a variety of different perspectives. We're going to let them introduce themselves to you. We'll ask them a few questions, and then hopefully at the end we'll have time for questions from the audience. So we'll get started. On the end is Chuck Chippero from Pulte. Chuck, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yes, again, my name is Chuck Chippero. My role at PulteGroup is I'm the National Director of Production Innovation and Strategic Sourcing. I've been with Pulte 18 years, and for those that don't know, PulteGroup, we're a national builder. We build approximately 23,000 homes a year, a little over 1,000 homes here in Georgia.
Okay. Next is Erika Gupta from the Department of Energy. Erika?
Good morning. So I am from the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office in Department of Energy, and I've been with the department about 8 years. I recently switched from working in hydrogen and fuel cell technology in the transportation space over to the energy efficiency space, working with the buildings group on intelligent load control in buildings and efficiency that we can get to through controls.
Okay. And thirdly is Jim Leverette from Research and Development Southern Company. Jim?
Yeah, my name is Jim Leverette. I'm a research engineer with Southern Company based out of Birmingham, Alabama. My role is to look at behind the meter technology, so anything on the customer side of the meter, and try to look at how these new technologies that are coming down the pipeline may impact the way we interact with our customers.
Okay, thank y'all. Let's just get right to it. Jim, let's just start with you with the first question. With the development of smart homes and smart neighborhoods, how that might change how utilities either serve customers or provide services to customers?
Yeah, that's a great question, Todd. The Internet of Things technology that we've seen proliferating over the last few years is a huge change and opportunity for the way utilities and customers interact with each other. Obviously, most electricity and most energy in the United States is consumed inside of buildings, whether that's residential, commercial, or industrial. And so these smart technologies potentially give us a way to transact and interact with our customers. So the buzzword is buildings to grid. We may be able to work with customer devices, say a water heater in the customer's home or business, and be able to turn that off or shift the load during peak times to better balance the grid so that we can keep rates low for customers and still serve those customers really well.
Okay, thank you. When we're trying to do the building to grid integration, what are the biggest challenges that we have with those types of efforts?
Yeah, some of the main challenges that we have right now are in the cyberspace. How do we connect with these devices that are behind the meter? How do we do that from a security standpoint? How do we do that just from a practical standpoint? A lot of manufacturers use different technologies. And then even just the standards as far as are using Wi-Fi or using some other communication protocol. So that's probably the biggest challenge right now. And then down the road, once we figure out that technical challenge, I think the biggest challenge would just be working with customers to make sure that when we use a customer resource that we minimize or eliminate the impact on that customer. So how do we do a transaction with that customer seamlessly without impacting them, but also providing some sort of reliable grid service?
Okay, we hear the term next generation demand response. Is that what we're talking about when we hear that?
Yeah, that's really what we're trying to talk about. Demand response has a lot of connotations, and that connotation is typically you put in a device, you put in a switch on a water heater or a heat pump, and when the utility is really high, they send a signal, it just cuts it off. It cycles that unit on and off. and that has a lot of customer impacts. And so what we're trying to do here is demand response 2.0 or something along those lines, where instead of turning on a device and turning it off, we really just, we adjust the mode or we change the set point in order to achieve a power reduction, but you're not necessarily just eliminating that asset for the customer perspective. They're still able to utilize that to some degree during that event.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jim. Chuck, from an industry that's trying to attract new home buyers, what is your perspective around smart homes in terms of, is this become an expectation of home buyers, or is this also something you have to sell to get their attention?
Yeah, Todd, thanks. Yeah, in our experience, and I go back just a few years ago, many home builders have made various attempts in order to implement smart homes. They've installed all kinds of different systems with hubs. Most of those experiences have fallen flat, and I'm going back 5, maybe even 10 years ago, because technology was changing and the consumer really wasn't that educated. So a few years back, we developed a platform. We did a lot of consumer research. What we learned from that research is really the answer to the question, is that today it's table stakes. You know, you need to, as a builder, provide a robust backbone so that that consumer can actually customize the house for their smart needs. And so we implemented that nationally, and it has resonated extremely well with the consumer. You know, the ability to take a building block approach to make the house as smart as they need, because our customers right now have different expectations. But basically the expectation is that the house is smart home ready.
Yeah, so when we think about smart home from different optionality, all the research says basically security is the base package for a smart home, but there are other optionality as well. In your line of work, customers, they may choose their flooring and their cabinetry and countertops. Are they now expecting to have optionality on their smart home packages as well?
Yeah, you know, we still view this as largely a do-it-yourself kind of space. You know, they want to have the backbone established so they can customize it perhaps later. They enjoy having a few choices, but it's very difficult to predict exactly what our buyers are going to want. So it is a matter of giving them some choices, but making that as simple as possible. And, you know, frankly, consumers still want beautiful cabinetry, nice countertops, kitchens, baths. Those are still very important. But when it comes to this space, they really are looking for economic solutions. And one thing from a market research standpoint, we found consumers very much did not want to see a fee-based solution. So we worked very hard to make sure that what we offered was not fee-based, because we found that to be very important to our consumer.
Interesting. Are there any demographic trends? We know smart home itself is growing double digit, but are there any geographic trends in the home buyer market that is leading this effort versus other demographics?
Not so much geographic, I'd say demographic. We definitely see the younger buyers out there, the millennials, you know, having a greater interest. I mean, they grew up with a smartphone in their hand, so connectivity is extremely important to them. So really it's the demographics, although the 55 and better crowd is very tech savvy. So we find that we have to offer just as much, you know, optionality and features to that buyer group as well.
Yeah, that's another growing sector is age in place, and technology is going to be real important. Home technology, smart home technology, is going to be very important to the age in place consumer. Have y'all seen that as well?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. You know, those buyers are you know, definitely looking for, you know, more features that make their lives more comfortable and also improve the whole living environment.
Yeah, I think a lot of the research we've seen, I think you would concur with this, is convenience is the biggest driver. They don't want complexity, and the consumer does not want additional complexity in their life. It's convenience that they're looking for.
Yeah, and that raises a good point. One of the biggest challenges in this space is you know, how well the system operates, how well it can be maintained. Real concern for home builders is installing a system that is complicated and difficult for that consumer to understand. So having a white glove service, the ability to get that system up and running to satisfy that home buyer is extremely important.
And I assume service after the installation is important to the consumer. Who do I call when this doesn't work like it's supposed to work? Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. If you don't have that in place, you will have dissatisfied customers.
Okay. Well, Erika, from Department of Energy perspective, what are some things we can do in the smart home space around controllability and managing distributed energy in connection with these smart homes?
So one of the things from the Department of Energy's perspective that's so interesting about these smart homes is the value that they can provide to people who don't live in smart homes. So as we have more and more homes on the network, on the grid, and we can aggregate these homes to help provide peak shaving and peak power reductions, that can help us lower the cost of energy for everyone, including those in the traditional homes. So while these homes coming in are highly energy efficient, I think one of the most beautiful parts about these homes is their flexibility. Being able to pre-cool or preheat a home, to have your water heater turn on in advance when power prices are low, when the grid has excess renewables, and then turn them off and not use that power when you have a peak can really help us avoid a lot of additional cost. And that cost savings is good for everyone. The latest EIA data shows that 1/3 of Americans still struggle to pay their energy bills. If we can do something here with these intelligent load control options that do not impact the consumers of those homes, allow them to be comfortable, they see no difference, and save energy and reduce costs for everyone, that's a real win.
Okay, good. Just general questions about smart neighborhood, just some challenges. What do y'all see are the challenges to continue the growth in smart home and smart neighborhood?
I guess I'll start with that one. Well, I think the challenge is having a platform to manage change because devices, the whole space is continuing to evolve. And so for a builder, it's not uncommon to be in a community multiple years. And so in this space evolves so fast, what you're offering, your first 100 home buyers could be very different than the last 100 in a given community. So managing that platform is a challenge. And then the one I brought up earlier, and that is making sure that it's operable and can be maintained. Whatever the smart home solution is in a given house is very important. It's really been one of the barriers as to why builders have moved pretty slowly into this space.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of consumers' feedback or pain points we understand is trying to connect all their devices and different platforms and trying to bring that into one app on their phone, so to speak. And that now the providers of those services are not allowing that. What do you think can we do to get some kind of consistency around the communication protocols and things for those apps to be more interoperable?
That's a great question, Todd. And if I had the answer, I probably wouldn't be sitting here on the stage, per se. I think that when we see more customer demand, when we see more of the homes that are starting to have these things in place, and there's a lot more customers that are exposed to it, that will drive the market a little bit more towards each other because the customers will say, I really need these things to work together. Yeah, it's interesting. We have the 2 smart neighborhood projects, one in Birmingham, one in Atlanta, and we know that customers want to be able to communicate via as simplistic of an interface, one app as they can. And in those projects, despite everything we could do, they still have a couple of 3 or 4 apps where they have to have individual accounts in order to be able to do that. And it just seems kind of crazy in this day and age that there's not a better option than that. I do think one thing that is more leading edge on that is the voice controls. Both the Google Assistant, the Alexas of the world are more frequently crossing that divide than the apps are. And I think that's because it's a lot more challenging for somebody to build a natural interface with a technology. And so they're leaning on an expert in the space, whether that's an Amazon or a Google, to make that happen.
Okay. Erika, we think about a couple different models for providing energy for smart homes or smart neighborhoods. One is maybe a community scale microgrid. The other is home-based solar and battery storage. What, from the DOE perspective, do you see? Is there room for both of those, or is there going to be a winner and a loser in that space?
So I do think there is room for both of those. It depends on your community, how much space you have available. You know, in some locations, rooftop solar makes a lot more sense than a community microgrid because you may just not have the space available. And it's something that we are trying to look into and understand more. What are the trade-offs? What are the benefits? When does one make more sense versus the other? In both cases, it allows us to optimize the energy use for each individual home and then at the community scale as well, because we can trade power between units.
Yeah, I think that's also an interesting question for the home builder as well. How do y'all see that question?
Yeah, very challenging question because we've done a lot of work building net zero energy homes. That's certainly one path that gives the consumer some independence. Yet the flip side of that, we're seeing the opportunity now to work with utilities, work with developers to really provide community solutions that can be shared. Well, obviously we did our Georgia power project. We're very interested in making sure that there's a robust grid that's cost effective because the total cost of ownership, very important to our customers. It's not just about that initial price point, it's about what is the total cost to operate. And so we see the potential working in a partnership with utilities, our developers, and ourselves to move more towards those neighborhood solutions as opposed to individual net zero homes.
Do you see from consumers what are the bigger drivers? Is it sustainability or cost savings to them from an energy perspective in a smart home?
It's both. They expect both. We find sustainability is starting to get a little bit more traction. After years of selling to consumers, we have found that, sustainability, energy efficiency wasn't a very high priority, but things have changed and we are seeing much greater interest in that. And it's, when you have a neighborhood that's sustainable, it's focused on not just energy conservation, but water conservation. It actually brings consumers, it brings people through the door. They're curious and interested, and if the price point is right, location is right, it'll give you a selling advantage.
Okay. So let me ask you another question just to the panel. What do y'all see as the future for smart home? Where do we see this going? Erika?
That's a challenging question, of course. We never like to predict the future, but as we imagine neighborhoods of the future, we're imagining neighborhoods where we are very connected, not just within the home, but between homes and between homes and the grid. And this future allows us to use our buildings very much like a battery, a virtual battery. So buildings are 75%, roughly 3/4 of the load on the electricity grid. That's an enormous amount of energy that if we are able to flex and move, we can help avoid these energy peaks. And we imagine a future where we have a transactive system, energy system, or at least interactive energy system where the grid and the buildings communicate in order to minimize peaks and flatten the overall load, maximize use of renewables and clean power, and really work together while also providing an improved experience for any of the occupants in those buildings as well. So I think these neighborhoods are demonstrations of the future.
I think that one of the main opportunities in the future is to truly put the smart in the word smart. So a lot of the smart home technologies today are effectively remote control technologies. They're not necessarily making a lot of decisions, if any decisions, for the homeowner or on behalf of the homeowner. And so, I think a lot of things, especially interacting with the grid, right? Customers do not want to have to deal with that regularly. They just want things to work when they want them to work, and they want to be comfortable, and they want to reduce their costs as much as possible. And so the home needs to be able to understand when is my owner home? What do they want? What do they expect from me to keep them comfortable? And what margin is there to provide some sort of benefit back to the grid and do that without manual intervention from the homeowners?
Absolutely. So just to add to that, the way that we're working now in the algorithms that are approaching this, they have specific models of the homes and they have inputs from the users as to what their preferences are. And we are allowing then this home to be controlled for the occupant without their involvement on a regular basis. And we are able to provide them cost savings through that control without impacting their comfort or hopefully actually improving their comfort in many cases. As we go to the future, we're looking at options for model-free control because you can imagine it is labor-intensive to create a specific model for each home. So one of the algorithms that we're developing right now is based on model-free control, and we're hoping to demonstrate that in about a year and a half at one of these neighborhoods to show that we can create solutions that are easily scaled to multiple different buildings and building types so that we can add that intelligence without the initial engineering cost to set it up.
Okay. Chuck, future from your
Yeah,
perspective?
well, I think the futures we'll see obviously increased penetration of hardware and functionality. It's really having it be operable is key. If it is meets the consumer's expectation from that standpoint, they'll be more comfortable with more features and more capability. But also in smart homes, really controlling the living environment is key. As we build houses that are very tight, that have very small air exchanges, indoor air quality management becomes critical. So really just that whole house engineering aspect really is driving the need for more sensors and more closed-loop control of those features in order to give the home buyer the comfort they're looking for. So also, we're seeing it now. I mean, streaming services are taking over. So we also got to make sure from a Wi-Fi standpoint, bandwidth standpoint, that the houses are able to really take care of that demand. And this is why in our backbone, we made sure we could at least handle 10 gig. Because we're just seeing the thirst for this data is unending. So we've got to be ready for that.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Okay, with that, I think we would open it up to the audience for questions. Does anyone have a question for the panelists today? Interesting. Oh, there's one.
Hi, good morning. My question is, with all these smart homes being connected to the network and things like that, is cybersecurity is going to be an issue at the consumer level?
So in the smart neighborhoods in Alabama and Georgia that Southern Company is a part of, we have the ability to send commands and signals to the thermostat or to the water heater. Cybersecurity is obviously very important in that regard. And so for us, I don't know if this fully answers your question, right? But that's a very important thing. And so what we've done is we've tried to use industry standards in order to manage that process. We're basically communicating to these vendors in the cloud. So using OAuth tokens to be able to hand off credentials. Basically, it's like if you log into a website and it says sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook. It's that same methodology. But just for the utility to have a communications pathway to a customer device. I will say one of the challenges is that, the utility can't really dictate to vendors how to do their cybersecurity. A lot of the vendors are bigger than the utility companies, right? Multi-billion-dollar companies or tens of billions of dollar companies that are making these products. And so, in a way, we're having to sort of whatever they support and whatever methodologies they use, that's what we're doing. Those companies obviously have a vested interest in the cybersecurity nature for their own customers. So I think in the projects we've done, we've seen it's been a very secure and easy process. And there doesn't really seem to be a lot of added risk over if you just have a smart thermostat in your home already, there's no additional vulnerability really.
So to add to that, in addition to using industry standards and ensuring that we try to prevent an attack from coming in, the department is also providing funding for research on how to identify if an attack has occurred and strategies to mitigate, isolate, and adapt to that in these technologies and control systems. So we have a funding opportunity announcement out right now that's under review. Hopefully we'll be making selections and announcements soon, specifically looking at adaptive building controls for cybersecurity. So yes, do everything we can to keep them out, but beyond that, also working on an intelligent strategy to address attack if it should happen.
Yeah, Chuck, from a consumer's perspective, are they showing concerns for data security?
Yeah, definitely. I think really they're more concerned really about privacy than they are cybersecurity. So, one of the offerings in our base package includes the Alexa Dot, and we simply tell our consumers some are uncomfortable because they're comfortable running off their phone. We said just unplug it, sell it, throw it in the desk drawer. It's up to you. You have control of that. And we have a lot of consumers, and they don't like the voice control for that, privacy reason. And so cybersecurity is the same way. This is a concern when they offer an upgraded package and they have a low voltage provider wanting to have access to their network. That's very concerning for some home buyers. So for us, we make sure working with our partners that our home buyers can at least have full control over their network and not give that control up.
Okay.
We have another question.
All right.
Good afternoon. Or good morning. I know that your primary focus are homes, but another important part of a community are schools. And I'm wondering, with the development of smart neighborhoods, if you thought how schools could be integrated into your process.
Erika?
So I can answer that from the Building Technologies Office perspective, which is we have activities both for residential and for commercial. So schools fall under commercial. And we do have a lot of work where we are looking at how do we use commercial buildings, schools, campuses, hospitals, and how do they fit into this system. Also, how do we prioritize electricity for them? We're also looking at things like resilience. Schools are often used as shelters in extreme weather events, so we need to be able to make sure that we are prioritizing the energy needs of those community centers.
Okay, I got one. Just what are some of the pros and cons as customers have moved into the Alabama smart neighborhoods and the initial ones in the Georgia smart neighborhoods? What are some of the pros and cons that you've heard from some of the customer feedback?
Yeah, I think that in general, the feedback we've gotten has been really positive. Honestly, I would have expected more concerns over the number of apps and the different integrations that they have to go through. But I really think people are just utilizing the smart home technology to whatever their level of comfort is. So for some people, it's there, they don't really do anything with it. And for others that are power users, they're doing quite a bit with it. I think that there are some challenges in some specific cases. Like if you have a very, very energy efficient heat pump like we do in these projects, sometimes you're constrained on which smart thermostat you can use because of the vendor. The controls only work with one thermostat. And so, in Alabama, we have had some customers that said, I prefer this other thermostat rather than the one I have, but they just don't really have the ability to use it because of that lock-in. And so I think that's probably the biggest challenge I've heard is saying that, they want to be able to choose what they're most comfortable with, and depending on the technology and what's actually in their house, they may or may not be able to.
Okay, maybe one more question. All right. Well, for that, let's give our panelists a round of applause for thank you.